Hi, my name is Annabelle Ramirez.
My name is Matthew Dietrich.
My name is Matthew Dudzik.
My name is Matthew Weathers.
My name is Carlos Gaviria.
My name is Luisana Rivas.
My name is Charbel Yubaile.
My name is John Noel.
I'm a violinist with the Apollo Chamber Players.
I'm the founder and director and one of the violinists of Apollo Chamber Players.
I'm the cellist with Apollo Chamber Players.
I'm a violist, and I'm joining the Apollo Chamber Players for this concert.
I play double bass, and I am a professor of music at Stephen F. Austin State University here in Texas.
I am a mezzo-soprano and a collaborator with the Ponce Project.
I'm a pianist and director of vocal performances at the Ponce Project Foundation.
I'm a pianist. I am the artistic director of the Ponce Project and a member of the board of directors.
Share your first impressions learning and rehearsing the music. This is what you expected from a Mexican composer from the first half of the 20th century.
Yes, we as Apollo Chamber Players, we love to explore the music of all cultures in addition to commissioning new music. So we've had a little bit of experience performing the music of Ponce in the past, and it was really wonderful to kind of be reintroduced to some new music of Ponce that we hadn't performed before, some new arrangements, and I really think that the music of Ponce should be better known around concert halls in the world and the United States, and I think that the Ponce Project, you all are doing a wonderful job of bringing to light this wonderful composer and his music.
So it's not my first encounter with the music of Ponce. In fact, we performed the little suite in a classic style in 2014, I believe. So that was sort of my main impression of him, maybe with some of his other popular songs. So I was really surprised with the range of styles that some of the other works sort of encompassed. So that was nice to see.
So I wasn't very familiar with the music of Ponce besides Estrellita. Everyone knows it, but it reminded me a lot of the music of Manuel de Falla and a little bit of the Impressionist. But on the other hand, it had that Mexican touch, the Mexican dance style, especially the piece that we're playing, the Malada Mexicana.
Well, not quite, because I know how prolific Manuel Ponce was and how he exceeded in every style that he embraced. I also know that in the Western tradition of classical music, those traditions have been explored. I wasn't surprised because I know how prolific Manuel Ponce was, and also I'm also certain that a lot of Latin American composers have explored the huge variety of classical musical styles in the Western world, so not that surprised.
I was very excited to learn this repertoire by Ponce, because even though I am from Mexico, and so I have performed his music and know his music from before, I was not aware of the variety of styles and the variety of inspirations that he had for his music. And so yes, I was very surprised especially at the songs that remind me of the art songs from Paris. So I can see all the influences that he had while traveling abroad and while being exposed to so many different cultures, and how he was able to absorb and to interpret each one of those cultures in his own way.
I have played a fair amount of the music of Ponce. I would say that I've delved in a little bit, and from the works that I've studied thus far, I was not surprised by the musical language of this concerto. What was striking to me is that it makes me feel like it's very much in line with the leaner standard romantic piano concertos like the Schumann Piano Concerto, the Chopin Second Concerto in F minor. It has some very nice parts for the string players to play, for the orchestra to play if you're playing it with the orchestra. It reminds me of the Chopin F minor just in terms of the interaction with the other instruments, but also just the economy of writing. When I say the word lean, I mean it seems that there's nothing overstated or overwritten about the material.
I've never played any Ponce before, and I'd barely heard any, actually. I'd heard the name, I'm sure I've heard some of the music, but it wasn't something that I had really encountered. I was surprised, actually. I didn't really know what to expect. I was surprised by how actually European a lot of it is. he fits right in with a lot of the other composers that we do know and hear a lot more of, until something happens in the harmony or something happens in the melody that it's suddenly like, oh, that's different than what I've been used to before. And it's been really exciting to kind of get to dive in and discover this music.
Share your first impressions learning and rehearsing you're playing the Balada Mexicana. Can you talk about that piece, where it comes from, what it is?
Yes, of course, as many pianists do in Mexico and in a few other places, I first learned the Balada Mexicana for solo piano. And then many years later, I was introduced to the version for piano and orchestra, which I performed a few months ago here in Houston. And then the Ponce Project Foundation commissioned an arrangement of this piece for piano and string quintet.
What do you think of the canon of the Latin American classical repertoire? Why is it underrepresented in the concert halls around the country, and what can be done about it?
It's a tough question. So I think it's part of like the old tradition, and I think in the past, I want to say 20, 30 years, it started to open. But I think it's something that happens from the ground up. So it starts with performers picking these pieces that are not as familiar, performing them a lot, getting the audience. Like a good example is the Danzón by Marquez. Like that's, everyone knows that piece right now, but it's a piece that it only became popular because performers started putting it into stage. So I think we're on the right track. There's still a lot of work. I think we just had Andres Orozco from Colombia in the Houston Symphony, and he tried to champion a lot of Latin American music with the orchestra. So I think it's that, like, as performers starts getting more comfortable programming these pieces, it becomes part of the canon. And I think that's why a project like the Ponce project is so important to bring attention to this repertoire that has not forgotten, but it's not as familiar for everyone as it should be. It's fantastic music.
I would think that there's a lot of reasons, but especially there's a bias that people have that says that if something is not performed, it's because its musical quality is not great and it doesn't really deserve a space. I think there are a lot of structural justice issues that come into that, and I and a lot of artists here at the Ponce Project Foundation have taken it upon themselves to break those barriers, and I think we take it out as our personal responsibility to showcase the breadth of the human experience, which deserves to be told. Different stories deserve to be told. So this music deserves to be heard.
Why that is the case? But that's exactly what I was saying. It's not necessarily new music, but it's new music to the audience. So, even though it was written a century ago, it should still be performed. But I don't think that we had, people like yourself, like championing these works, or, I don't know. I can't explain why, but I'm glad that things are coming back to light and being performed.
I think there's definitely space in every program for a wide variety of cultural music representing all people, the people of the United States, which is a melting pot. And particularly, I think, with our closest neighbor, Mexico, there's such a wealth of music to be explored and highlighted in the concert programming in the United States and abroad.
Well, I think there's just so much to be explored, and I think audiences here just don't know the depth of the music from Latin America, so it's great that we can put a program together that has such a variety of Ponce's music in it and bring that to American audiences. It's just scratching the surface.
Well, as being from the United States, myself from the state of North Carolina, one thing that was brought to my attention by the pianist Alan Feinberg, who's played a lot of American music from the United States. I'm not going to necessarily say music from Canada, but from the United States, North American classical music. He actually told me during my college years, when I worked with him for a semester as an undergraduate, that American pianists don't play American piano music. And I think it's a different problem with Latin American music because students who are, and professional performers who are playing in the United States have access to music from the United States. But I think, as our executive director, Omar Herrera, has said, one of the main things that the Ponce Project Foundation is encountering is it's very difficult to access these scores. Once we do access these scores, we find that there are often a lot of errors in them, which can be worked out, but it's part of our mission with the Ponce Project to make these revisions so that they're much easier to read. So I wouldn't say that it's the errors in the scores. I'd say it's simply just getting your hands on them.
So, as both as a student, I understand you're finishing your doctorate, and as a performer, as a professional, do you see a difference in the way they approach or they play the canon of the Latin American composers, like at school and at the concert hall?
That's a really good question. I feel like schools are both having more diverse programming because we don't need to sell tickets and aren't, as worried about building an audience with unfamiliar music, but also maybe a little behind in some ways because teachers know what they know, and so we don't get to have as much control over what we program. Professionally, I do think it's developing. There's a lot more emphasis on actually taking the time to find this music that we don't know or that only some communities know that isn't as familiar to everyone. But there's definitely room for more in both settings, for sure.
In the school, I know you just recently graduated with a doctorate, and how do they teach it at the school, and then as a professional musician also?
It's hardly taught at conservatories and universities in the US and other places besides Mexico. So I think there is a high need to share it with more people, especially for professors in, for instance, music history classes, to introduce their students to composers from other corners of the world and not just the typical Central European composers that we study in the classes there. And that's why also I did my doctoral dissertation and research on Ponce's art songs, because all that music needs to be more known in the US and the whole world.
What about as a professional musician? How often do you get to play this music in organizations that are not specialized in that, like the Ponce Project, but in just other ones?
So, seldomly, but every time I like to introduce his music, even to organizations outside of the Ponce Project. Of course, with the Ponce Project, I have performed in Canciones de Amor and Women Composers Latin America. Even some of his music with my wife, Broke Your Baile, with music for flute and piano. But I also like introducing it to orchestras, for example, that they don't know about the Balada Mexicana for piano and orchestra, and try to program that piece more often, I would say.
As a Mexican national that is in the US for many years now, professional musician, how do you see the Latin American repertoire being played here in this country?
Well, that's a tricky question. I feel like people lately have been trying to introduce the Latin American repertoire into the larger orchestras and organizations. However, I feel like they still need some more direction so that they program things that there's so much out there, and I feel like the things that get programmed are the same things over and over. So it's really nice to discover new repertoire and to have a source for new, not brand new music necessarily, but new music to the audiences.
But do you think there's an opening, like a genuine, honest opening in the concert hall that has been happening with this music?
I think there's a movement of showcasing underrepresented composers. However, it's not enough. We need to be doing more.
Yeah, the typical September Hispanic, and then
Yes.
they don't program anything
Yeah.
in March. As I said, what if we did German March and we only play Beethoven in March.
Yeah.
That would be absurd, right?
And what happens with these holidays is that it ends up being a tokenization of a certain population, whereas, as I said, their stories, everyone's stories deserve to be told all the time. Why are we just showcasing one perspective? That's what I think.
Please pick one of the pieces and give an example of something unique regarding Ponce, something that would define his style in your
So
impression.
I really like the Balada Mexicana, and for me it has this parallel with Mahler. He gets these quotations from songs into his music. So there's El Durazno and Acuérdate de mí, and those are very very obvious. And El Durazno has that typical pattern, the 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2, that it gives you like that Mexican appeal, while still doing the impressionist harmonies and orchestral colors. So it's a very interesting piece, and I think that one defines quite well Ponce's style.
I think it's interesting that he went through maybe a couple of different phases of style. So I don't know if there's one signature sound necessarily. I think his early music was very influenced by popular song, by folk music. And then as he studied in Paris, he was more influenced by the impressionist music that was going on, but maintained that sort of national flavor in his writing, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, the Balada Mexicana, that's really colorful and I think more evocative of his mature style.
It's got to be something with the harmony. I'm not entirely sure what. I haven't done enough of an analysis on any of it. But something there where you feel like you've been listening to some, more French, and a lot of it feels very French. Some French piece, and then suddenly something changes, and it's like, oh, that's not quite French anymore, is it? And something has happened in there. But the program covers a lot of different styles, so I'm not sure there's any one specific trick to it other than just the sound that he goes for. Something in that.
All of these songs are very different from his usual art song output. However, En Soi, I would say, is the one that made the biggest impression. Usually his his art songs are more informed by a folk tradition, so there's more wiggle room in how you deliver the rhythm and how you perform the piece, whereas En Soi and these songs are closer to what I would associate with a traditional art song or melody or chanson.
Okay, describe your involvement with the Ponce Project Foundation. How did you start? What is your role in it? What have you participated in?
I'm the director of vocal performances, so I do a lot of research on Ponce's art songs, even his canciones mexicanas, and the art songs, all the art songs that he wrote. So I, in collaboration with Dr. Herrera, we get manuscripts and then we program, we create programs. We set up the pieces that we will be performing and inviting, of course, singers or instrumentalists. I also have a focus on collaborative piano. So I play a lot of chamber music, and sometimes we invite other musicians to play with us.
Can you describe your involvement with the Ponce Project Foundation? How did it start, and what's been your role? Has it evolved? Has it changed? Where's it going?
Well, the more that I'm involved in it, the more I understand not only the importance, but how much I enjoy being a part of something that isn't about myself. And even the executive director, Omar Herrera, would say the same, that it's about the music. It's making the public more aware of this music by performing it first and possibly recording it, but then having other students and professionals perform it with us and on their own. We started out our first season in the fall of 2019, and I've played in every of the each of the three seasons, I've performed either some solo piano music or chamber music. This is my first time actually playing a concerto. But when the project started, as with any project, I wasn't aware of how endless it almost seems, the amount of work that has to be done. But what I really like about it is the selflessness of it and the humility of it.
Regarding your involvement with the Ponce Project Foundation, can you describe your involvement, your history with it? How did it start? What events have you participated in? Any special moments that you had?
Okay. So I first got involved with the Ponce Project Foundation at the beginning of 2021, the end of 2020, when we did the recital Canciones de Amor. And from then, I've also been participating in recitals like Women Composers of Latin America. I feel lucky to have such great participation. I really love that Omar gives me such leeway to explore this repertoire that I love so much and to really curate the selections that I bring to the concerts.
You play in all the pieces, right? In all
Yeah.
the 5 pieces.
I'm on every piece on the program.
Is there any particular one that speaks to you and why? In your part, right? In the viola part.
In my part itself, the little suite that we're opening the program with is probably the most demanding. There's never a moment to rest, because in movements like the canon, where a lot of composers maybe would have a canon and then somehow resolve it out to where it's not strict canon, it's completely strict. It goes completely through the same line in each part, and if you're off, you're off, and there's not much coming back from it. And so it's been really rewarding to have that kind of focus and energy in a piece and stay with it, because he asks a lot of us as players in some of those.
Yeah, because you're performing in all the pieces in the program, right?
I'm playing on everything, I think.
Everything. And especially the songs are quite different, right? How would you describe the difference in the styles between the pieces?
Yeah, so the opening piece, the little suite in a classic style, is sort of neoclassical and maybe a little intellectual, kind of shows off Ponce's prowess as a composer and his craftsmanship. And then as the program progresses, I think it's more and more romantic. And then those last songs are they're very colorful but dark and very expressive.
Any impressions of the piano pieces, of the concierto and the ballada?
And the ballada. The ballada is so fun to play. It's really beautiful, and I think it's probably the most nationalistic sounding, the most Mexican sounding of the pieces on the program. But it's very colorful. It's got some beautiful, lush string writing and some really spectacular piano writing on it too. So that's a great, has been a great piece to get to know on this program.
Is there any of you're playing in all the pieces basically? Did you know all of them, and which ones?
No, I actually did not know the Mexican ballad, the piano piece, and I did not know the songs also. And so the ballad was Balada Mexicana. It really surprised me because I felt like he really comes home, and he really shows us what his ancestry is and what his folk inspiration is, using two different dance inspired section and then a ballad from a song called Remember Me, Recuérdame. And so that was really nice to become familiar with this piece in particular.
Great. Can you pick one or two pieces from, you're playing in most of the pieces, right? Except for the first one.
Yeah.
Can you pick some examples of the style? Are they the same style? Are they different, and how so?
Well, what I really love about Ponce is that while he is being true to his native culture and the music of his homeland, he went to Paris and studied the music of Parisian composers and kind of absorbed all of the wonderful influences around him in 1920s Paris, which we know was kind of the hotbed of Impressionist music, Impressionist painters. But I also think that the individuals of Lassie were kind of pushing back and trying to find their own voice apart from the German Romanticism of the time, Wagner and Strauss and that kind of thing. And then also the Impressionist composers of Debussy. So I actually think that Ponce was really was able to find his voice and expand his color palette and his compositional style because of his time in Paris, while staying true to his roots.
And specifically the double bass repertoire from Latin America. Is it something you've been experienced that you know?
It's funny that you mentioned that. I'm actually playing with the school orchestra. I'm playing a concerto by an Argentinian/Mexican composer, Andres Martin, doing that in February. So we talk like once a week just to, hey, how do we do this? But yeah, it's because I was approached by one of my colleagues about, hey, we wanted to play something with the orchestra. How this piece, this other piece, this other. It's like, no, there are like 50 recordings of that out there. Let me try something new. So I called my friend Andres, and he suggested this piece, and yeah.
You play a lot. You play all the time, and a lot of music, not just Latin American music. You're very active. But regarding the Latin American repertoire, and maybe specifically the Mexican repertoire, is there any composer or piece specifically that you have that has a special place in your heart through the years that you haven't played, that would you like to play?
Let's see. I have played the Concierto Romántico just in two pianos, so someday I would like to play that piece with orchestra for sure.
Yeah, but Ponce wrote a version for orchestra, and this one is an arrangement, right? It's not by Ponce. Okay. How is the solo piece different from the orchestra in the piano part?
It's overall similar, I would say, but the main difference is that the one with orchestra has two big cadenzas that the piano one doesn't have, and there are a few harmonic changes and more modulations and different things that are not original in the solo piano version.
How would you describe the style of the piece?
It's, for sure, it has the influence of the romantic composers like Tchaikovsky, Franz Liszt, and many other ones. But also in the version for piano and orchestra, I also feel the influence of Paul Dukas and the French music that he was in contact with when he was living in Paris, especially in the cadenzas. There are some that have some almost like toccata-like sections.
And more specifically, you're from Venezuela, right?
I am Venezuelan. Yes.
You're Venezuelan. What about the music from Venezuela?
Oh, yes, of course. So, one of the things that I thank Omar the most for is the opportunity he's given me to showcase the music of Modesta Bor in particular, which is a Venezuelan, extremely interesting composer that the Ponce project has embraced, and Omar has allowed me to include in almost every recital that I've done with him. So.
Yeah, the music is great.
And it's great quality music.
And then lastly, Ponce was a pianist. He was not a string player. How does he write for the string? Is it very idiomatic? Do you find it, or not?
It depends. So some of the things we're playing are arrangements, and most of it fits very nicely. Some of the stuff, particularly actually in the suite, are a little challenging. It forces us to play in slightly uncomfortable positions but not not too far, not something I wouldn't expect to play. So definitely comfortable, just challenging at times.
You had to practice that part.
I had to practice the part. I still should practice the part.
Well, you're sounding great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.